Today I'm going to be talking to you about layers within Photoshop. I believe it's one of the most important things to understanding Photoshop and using it to its highest ability. Once you understand layers, which can be kind of complicated, it'll make your time a lot easier and a lot more fun within Photoshop. So right now I have an image opened into Photoshop. It is a JPEG. And when you open an image into Photoshop, you might notice that you get this background layer in your layers panel. Now if you do not see your layers panel, you can come up here to the window and come down to layers and open it up. Now mine's checked off because I already have it open. So to unlock my layer, very simply, all I have to do is double click, and now it's going to ask if I want to rename my layer. I'm not going to do that here because I want to show you a different way to do it. So I'm just going to click OK. So now instead of it saying background with a little lock, now it says layer 0. So another way to rename your layer, other than in that dialog box that popped up, is just to double click the word layer 0. And now it is a editable text box, so I'm just going to call it image. And now I can either hit enter or just click off of the layer as well to enter in my new text. There's a couple different menus you can get as well from your layers panel. So if I click on the little thumbnail, so this is that little sample picture that you see, if I right click on that, I get one menu. The one thing that I use in this the most is select pixels, and I can show you that in a different video. Another menu you can get is by clicking anywhere to the right of the thumbnail. So I'm just going to click, right click, and now I get a different set of options as well. So just make sure you're aware of where you're clicking to right click because it will give you a different menu. So you may want to create new layers. Now sometimes Photoshop will create a new layer for you. For example, if I were to add a shape onto my image, you see that it popped up as rectangle 1, and now I have a rectangle here. So Photoshop went ahead and created the layer for me. But if I go to use my brush tool and I'm on my original image and I go and click on my brush, now I have this really cool leaf pattern, but the problem is if later on I don't like it or I want to make changes to it, at this point I cannot because now it is a part of my image layer. So if I were to grab my erase tool and I want to erase it, well, now I'm erasing my actual image. Luckily, right now, you can go to your history panel and you can click up to undo changes. But if I have saved my work or closed out Photoshop, when I come back, that history panel will start new. So that only works when you're still working on the current project. So I went ahead and I undid that, and I'm going to show you two ways to create a new layer. One is what I like to call the politically correct way, which is going to the layer menu up at the top, going down to new, and then new layer. And then you see Photoshop will give you the shortcut over to the right. I'm on a Mac. And it'll ask me here if I want to rename my layer. I don't, so I'm just going to click OK. And now I have my new layer. Now, a shortcut to doing that is in your layers panel. It's down here at the bottom, looks like a little piece of paper with like a little folded up corner. So I'm just going to click on that. And now you can see it didn't ask me if I wanted to rename my layer, which is fine because we already know how to rename our layers if we want. But it did add a new layer here for me. And the reason why this is important, so now if I go to my brush tool and I click and drag, now this is on a new layer. So what that means is I can change my opacity, and that's over in the layer panel. The opacity is how much you see through an object. So if I bring it down, it's going to make it really, really light, almost to the point where maybe you barely even see it, if that's what you want. You also have this option over here, which is called your blend mode. And depending on the color of the object you're changing and what it's on top of will depend. So you just kind of have to play around with these sometimes. I always like overlay is sometimes fun. The multiply gives it a little different look. You can use the screen. So all of these are a little bit different. Again, depending on what the color is of the objects that you're changing and what it's on top of. So I'm just going to go back to normal. Another thing about your layers, you might notice this little eyeball to the far left. That's your visibility. So if I just click on it, and you'll notice now my eyeball's gone, I have this little square. Now my layer is hidden. It's still there, but it's maybe not in my way while I'm typing or doing something else, and then when I'm done, I can always bring it back. So now I have a couple different layers. I am going to show you how to delete a layer as well. So this layer 1 I no longer need. It's blank. So I'm just going to hit this trash can down here, or you could also right click and delete the layer. So if I hit the little trash can, it'll ask me, are you sure you want to delete? Yes. And now it's gone. And I don't need my rectangle anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that one as well. So another cool feature, so I will hide my leaves for right now. Another cool feature that I really like is the layer via copy. So I'm just going to grab my quick select tool, and I'm going to quickly select part of this image. So I'm just going to click and drag. It's kind of like using a paintbrush, and it doesn't have to necessarily be perfect, but I'm going to get it as best as I can. So I don't want all this background, so I'm going to grab the little negative part, maybe make it a little bit bigger, and kind of get rid of some of that. So basically I have her hair, her head, and her neck. Again, I'm not worried about it being too perfect. All right, so now I have this selected. Now I'm going to go over here to Layer, New, Via Copy. Now it doesn't look like anything has changed, but if I come over to my layers, you'll notice I have a new layer on top of my original image. So if I hide the original image, you can see the selection that I had. So now that I have a couple different layers, I'm going to add some text so I can show you how to move your layers around. I'm just going to change my text color to, I don't know, let's do like a purple color or something. So I'm just going to type her name. And I'm going to resize it. Now you can resize the font by highlighting it and coming up here, but since I don't want to guess on how big I want it, I'm just going to grab my move tool, do Command or Control T, hold Shift, and then enlarge my font to kind of fill up my whole area. I kind of teach this when I do a magazine project in my Design 1 class. So right now I have this Lily Collins, which looks great. I have a nice picture, but it's kind of intruding on my actual image of Lily Collins. I don't want that. So to move the layers around, all I have to do is simply click and drag, and you'll notice that a little dark bar pops up between the two layers that I'm moving it to, and when I release, now it is there between the two layers. So think of layers as literally pieces of paper on top of each other. If the one layer is on top of another, it's literally on top of another in Photoshop. So right now I can select my layer 3, and I can kind of clean this up a little bit with my eraser tool. Just kind of clean that up. Maybe I don't want, there we go, anything disrupting the text a little bit. Because I have it as a layer via copy, I'm not actually going to really edit the picture too much, but it'll just kind of clean it up. I could also re-add my leaves here if I wanted to. I could move those around, so if I wanted it here but not here, I could put it on the very bottom. I could bring it up to the top. So you can see just moving your layers around makes a difference on where or how much they are seen. Just again, depending on what you're doing. So I would say these are the main basic ideas to your layers that are really going to help you out when it comes to using Photoshop. Again, one of the things you should always double check if you're trying to do something in Photoshop, it happens to all of us, and you're like, why can't I do this? Double check what layer you're on. A lot of times I notice that students will be on the wrong layer trying to edit it, and I simply walk over and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I said, you're just on the wrong layer. So just always, that's a good way to double check yourself. I hope this helped.